I stood in the rain outside that courthouse in Seattle, holding a phone that had just delivered 3 words that shattered whatever was left of my world. The text from an unknown number glowed on the screen. Your children disappeared. Not lost, not missing, disappeared. As if someone had simply erased them from existence. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the phone, and behind me through the glass doors, I could still see Julian Croft, my ex-husband, smiling that cold, satisfied smile as he walked away with his lawyer. He had just won full custody of our children an hour ago, and now they were gone. But before I tell you how I got my children back and brought down an entire criminal empire, before I explain how a broken mother became someone even the monsters feared, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt powerless against someone who seemed untouchable, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of people who refuse to stay victims. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in my shoes, because what happened next nobody could have predicted. Let me take you back to where it all began 16 years before that rainy day in Seattle. I met Julian Croft at a charity fundraiser in Manhattan. I was 26, fresh out of Columbia Law School, idealistic and hungry to make a difference. He was 32, devastatingly handsome, with this quiet confidence that made everyone in the room gravitate toward him. He told me he worked in import-export, that he'd built his business from nothing. I was so naive. I thought his intensity was passion. I thought his possessiveness was love. I thought the way he slowly isolated me from my friends was just him wanting me all to himself. My mother, Elena Romano, never liked him. She would look at Julian with these hard, knowing eyes, and I mistook her concern for old-fashioned overprotectiveness. She had always been secretive about her past, about my father Lorenzo, who died when I was 5. She never remarried, never dated, just poured everything into raising me and running her small antique shop in Maine. When I told her I was marrying Julian, she went quiet for a long moment, then said something I'd never forget. Some men wear masks so well you don't see their true face until it's too late to run. I laughed it off. I was in love. I was blind. The first few years of marriage were a carefully constructed illusion. Julian was attentive, generous, supportive of my career as a family law attorney. We had our daughter Sophie when I was 28, then our son Max 2 years later. I thought I had everything. But looking back now, I can see the cracks I ignored. The way Julian never let me meet his business partners. The mysterious phone calls he'd take in another room. The times he'd disappear for days with vague explanations about deals closing overseas. The offshore accounts I wasn't allowed to ask about. My mother died of a sudden heart attack when I was 35. I was devastated. Julian seemed supportive, even helped arrange her funeral. But after she died, he became different, more controlling. He started questioning my work schedule, my client meetings, even my friendships with other attorneys. He convinced me to work from home more often, to spend more time with the children. I rationalized every red flag because I'd built my entire adult life around this man and our family. Then came the divorce. I discovered text messages on his phone messages that made it clear he'd been having affairs for years. Multiple women, some of them barely out of college. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He looked at me with this cold detachment and said, "What did you expect, Mia? You got boring after the kids. That was it. 16 years of marriage dismissed like a failed business transaction." I filed for divorce immediately. I was a family law attorney. I knew how these things worked. I had documentation, I had evidence of his infidelity. I had everything I needed to ensure I'd get primary custody and a fair settlement. What I didn't know was that Julian had been planning for this moment for months, maybe years. The custody battle was brutal. Julian hired the most expensive legal team in Seattle, lawyers who specialized in destroying opposing parties. They painted me as an unstable workaholic who neglected her children. They found every late night I'd worked, every school event I'd missed, due to court appearances, every moment I'd prioritized my career. They had witnesses, people I'd never met, testifying about my supposedly erratic behavior. I fought back with everything I had, but I felt like I was shadowboxing. Every punch I threw hit nothing but air. The final hearing was on a Thursday in November, exactly 1 year after I'd filed. I sat in that courtroom watching the judge's face as he delivered his verdict. Full custody to Julian Croft, with supervised visitation for me every other weekend. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. Sophie was 11, Max was 9. They were my entire world, and a judge had just handed them to a man I now knew was a stranger. As I stood there in shock, unable to process what had just happened, Julian walked past me. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered words that would replay in my nightmares for months. "You were never a match for me, Mia. The kids are mine now." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who'd never once doubted the outcome. I watched him leave with his lawyers, watched them celebrate in the courthouse lobby, watched my children's future disappear through those glass doors. My attorney, a woman I'd respected and trusted, could barely look at me. "I'm sorry, Amelia, I don't understand what happened." It's like the judge had already made up his mind before we even started. That night, I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in Seattle, couldn't be in that apartment where my children's empty rooms screamed their absence. I drove through Oregon, through the night, through the rain that seemed to mirror the storm inside me. I called Sophie and Max, but Julian didn't let them answer. I left voicemails, dozens of them, telling them I loved them, that I was fighting for them, that this wasn't over. But it felt over. It felt like I'd lost everything that mattered. 3 days later, I ended up at my mother's old house in Maine, the place where I'd grown up. It had been sitting empty since she died, and I'd been meaning to sell it, but never found the emotional strength. The house was exactly as she'd left it, frozen in time. Her reading glasses still on the side table, her favorite blanket draped over the couch, her collection of old books lining the shelves. I spent the first week there in a fog of grief and rage. I barely ate, barely slept. I replayed every moment of the custody battle, trying to understand how I'd lost so completely. I was a damn good lawyer. I knew the law. I'd helped dozens of parents navigate custody cases. How had I failed so spectacularly when it came to my own children? It was during the second week, when I finally forced myself to start cleaning out the basement, that everything changed. The basement was dusty and cluttered with decades of accumulated belongings. My mother had been a collector, never throwing anything away. I was boxing up old furniture and forgotten decorations and saw when I noticed something odd about the wall near the old furnace. The bricks looked newer, different from the rest of the foundation. The mortar was cleaner, less weathered. Curiosity pulled me forward. I grabbed a hammer from my father's old toolbox and started chipping away at the mortar. It crumbled easily, too easily. After about 20 minutes of work, I'd exposed enough to see there was empty space behind the false wall. My heart was pounding as I continued to break through the bricks. Behind them was a modern steel safe, completely incongruous with the old basement around it. It had an electronic keypad, which seemed impossible given that my mother had barely known how to use a cell phone. I stared at that safe for a long time, my mind racing through possibilities. Then, almost on instinct, I typed in my birthday, 08-15-1989. The lock clicked open. Inside the safe was a world I'd never known existed. Stacks of $100 bills easily over $200,000. Multiple passports with my mother's photo, but different names. A set of documents that looked like identity papers for me and the kids, also with different names. A small handgun, cleaned and oiled, clearly maintained. And a leather-bound ledger that looked like it belonged in a different century, its pages thick and yellowed. But what stopped my breath was the envelope on top of everything, with my name written in my mother's handwriting, for Amelia, to be opened only in the darkest hour. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, but when I held it up to the basement's dim light, I could barely see the words. They were faint, like the ink had faded. Then I noticed a small UV flashlight clipped to the letter, the kind they used to check for counterfeit bills. When I turned on the UV light and shone it on the paper, words blazed into visibility, written in some kind of special ink that only showed under ultraviolet light. My mother's careful handwriting glowed in the purple light, and as I read, my entire understanding of my life crumbled. "My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, it means Julian has revealed himself. I prayed this day would never come, that he would keep his cover forever, and you'd live your life in blissful ignorance. But I knew better. Men like him always show their true nature eventually. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you more clearly. I tried to keep you away from him, but love makes us blind to truths we don't want to see." I had to stop reading for a moment, my vision blurring with tears. I steadied my breathing and continued. "Julian Croft is not who he claimed to be. He was never forced into anything, never coerced, never an innocent man trapped by circumstances. He belongs to them, to the Falcone family. Your marriage was not a love story, Amelia. It was a trap, a 16-year operation designed for purposes I could only partially uncover before I ran out of time. The words hit me like physical blows. 16 years. Our entire marriage had been a lie from the very beginning. Your father, Lorenzo Romano, was part of that world once. He was Leo Falcone's right-hand man, his most trusted lieutenant. But your father was a good man who'd made terrible choices when he was young. When I became pregnant with you, he wanted out. He wanted to give you a clean life, a chance to be something better than what he'd been. The Falcones don't accept resignations. They killed him for trying to leave, and they made it look like a random mugging. You were 5 years old. I gasped, pressing my hand against my mouth. My father had been murdered, and my mother had known all along. I spent the next 20 years building a new life for us, hiding in plain sight. I collected evidence, documented everything, became an invisible archivist of the Falcone Empire's sins. The ledger you're holding contains everything. Financial records, names of corrupted officials, details of criminal operations spanning decades. It's enough to dismantle Leo Falcone's entire organization, to send him and dozens of others to prison for the rest of their lives. My eyes moved to the leather ledger sitting at the bottom of the safe. It looked so innocuous, like an old accountant's journal. But my mother had just told me it was a weapon capable of destroying one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. I don't know what Julian's endgame is, whether they wanted access to your legal expertise, or if you were simply a way to legitimize his identity, or if there's something else I couldn't see. But I know he's dangerous, and I know you can't trust him. You can't trust the police either. The Falcones own too many of them. Don't trust the FBI. Don't trust anyone. Then came the part that would change everything. There is one person you can turn to. His code name is Thorn. He's a federal agent, but not just any agent. He's been investigating the Falcones for 15 years, completely off the books. He knew your father. He made me a promise that if anything ever happened to me, he'd protect you. When you call him, use these exact words: "The snowstorm has arrived in Vermont." That's the signal he's been waiting for. His number is programmed into the burner phone at the bottom of the safe. I frantically dug through the safe and found the phone old but charged with a single number stored in its memory under the name T. The gun is not for you to end your pain, my darling daughter. It's for you to fight back. I taught you to be strong, to be smart, to be better than the world that tried to break me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you any of this while I was alive. I'm sorry I had to leave you so many secrets. But I knew that if Julian ever showed his true nature, you'd need every advantage I could give you. You're stronger than you know, Amelia. You're a Romano. We don't surrender. We survive. And when we're backed into a corner, we fight our way out. I love you, always. Your mother, Elena. I sat on the cold basement floor for what felt like hours, the letter in one hand, the UV light in the other, reading those words over and over. My entire life had been built on lies. My marriage had been an operation. My father had been murdered. My mother had spent decades living in fear, collecting evidence, preparing for a war she hoped would never come. And now that war had found me. I opened the ledger with shaking hands. Page after page of meticulous handwriting, dates, names, amounts, shell companies and offshore accounts, bribes and payoffs, names I recognized from the news. Politicians and judges and police chiefs, details of drug shipments, money laundering operations, even murders. My mother had documented everything, complete with cross-references and supporting evidence locations. At the back of the ledger was a section specifically about Julian Croft. Real name Julian Caruso. He'd been placed into my life when I was still in law school, his entire identity constructed by the Falcones. They'd known about me, about my connection to Lorenzo Romano, and they'd seen an opportunity. The notes suggested they wanted someone on the inside of the legal system, someone who could provide insight into law enforcement strategies and judicial processes. I'd been useful to them for 16 years, without ever knowing it. The rage that filled me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was cold and sharp and clarifying. Julian hadn't just cheated on me. He hadn't just stolen my children through some underhanded legal maneuvering. He'd stolen my entire adult life. Every memory I had, every moment I thought was real, had been contaminated by his lies. And suddenly the custody battle made perfect sense. The judge who seemed to have made up his mind before hearing evidence. The witnesses who appeared out of nowhere. The legal team that fought with resources no legitimate import-export businessman should have. The Falcones had orchestrated the entire thing. But why? What did they want with my children? I picked up the burner phone with hands that had stopped shaking. I'd moved beyond shock into something colder, something focused. I dialed the number stored under T. It rang 3 times before a man's voice answered, cautious and professional. Yes. I took a breath and spoke the words my mother had left me. The snowstorm has arrived in Vermont. The silence on the other end lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt infinite. Then the voice changed, became urgent. Elena's daughter? Yes. Where are you right now? My mother's house, in Maine. Listen to me very carefully, Amelia. You need to leave that location immediately. Do you have the ledger? Yes. How did you know about it? Elena told me years ago that if anything happened to her, you'd eventually find it. The Falcones have been looking for that ledger since your father died. If Julian knows you're there, if he has any idea what you found, you're in immediate danger. Get in your car and drive. I'll call you back in 5 minutes with a location. Wait, my children. Julian won custody and now they're missing. I got a text that they disappeared. Another pause, this one filled with what sounded like typing. When did you get this text? This morning, right after I left the courthouse. Forward it to this number. Don't go anywhere near Julian or try to find the kids yourself. These people don't make idle threats. I'm mobilizing a team now. Drive, Amelia. Drive and I'll call you back. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Then I heard it, the sound that turned my blood to ice. A car engine outside growing closer. Then another. Headlights swept across the basement window. I grabbed the ledger, the gun, and the cash, shoving them into a backpack I found nearby. I turned off the basement lights and crept to the window. 2 black SUVs had pulled into the driveway. Men were getting out, 4 of them, moving with military precision toward the house. They'd found me. Somehow they knew I was here. I ran for the basement stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The burner phone rang in my pocket, and I answered it while running. Thorne's voice was sharp. Are you driving? Men just arrived. I'm in the house. They're coming in. How many? 4 that I saw. Are you armed? Yes. My mother's gun felt heavy in my jacket pocket. There's a service road behind your mother's property that leads to the old logging trail. Can you get to it? I knew that trail. I'd played on it as a kid. Yes, but my car is in the driveway. Forget the car. Get to the trail. There's an old fire watch station about 3 miles north. Get there and hide. I'm sending someone. Who? Someone your father trusted with his life. His name is Silas Blackwood. He's been watching over you from a distance since your mother died, but he couldn't get close without risking exposure. He's 15 minutes out. Footsteps on the front porch. The doorknob rattling. I ran for the back door, burst through it into the cold Maine night. The forest behind my mother's house was dark and thick with old-growth trees. I could hear shouting behind me, voices commanding me to stop. Then came the gunshot. It splintered the tree next to my head, and I ran faster, crashing through underbrush, the backpack bouncing against my spine. I'd grown up in these woods, knew them in a way city kids never know urban spaces. I found the old trail by instinct, my feet remembering paths my conscious mind had forgotten. Behind me, lights bounced through the trees. They were following, but they were slower, less familiar with the terrain. I pushed deeper into the forest lungs, burning legs aching, driven by pure survival instinct, and a rage that wouldn't let me die before I understood what they'd done to my children. The fire watch station appeared through the trees like a ghost from another era, a wooden tower that hadn't been used in decades. I climbed the ladder as quietly as I could, wincing at every creak of old wood. The platform at the top had a small enclosed room, mostly glass, designed for spotting forest fires. I crawled inside and pressed myself against the back wall, the gun in my hand, waiting. The minutes dragged by like hours. I could hear them searching below their flashlights, cutting through the darkness. One of them called out she couldn't have gotten far. Spread out and sweep north. Their voices faded as they moved past my hiding spot. I forced myself to breathe slowly, quietly, every muscle tensed. The burner phone vibrated in my pocket, and I answered it without speaking. Thorne's voice was barely a whisper. Silas is approaching from the south. He'll make contact soon. Stay quiet and trust him, Amelia. He knew your father better than anyone. The line went dead again. I waited in the dark, gripping my mother's gun, wondering how my life had transformed from suburban mother to fugitive in less than 24 hours. I thought about Sophie and Max, about where they might be, whether they were safe, whether they were scared. The thought of them in danger made something primal and fierce rise up in my chest. Then I heard it. A soft sound below, different from the others. A whistle, 3 notes that triggered a memory from early childhood. My father used to whistle that exact pattern when he came home from work. I'd forgotten it until this moment. A voice floated up low and rough. Elena's daughter, I'm coming up. Don't shoot me. A figure appeared at the top of the ladder, moving with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with silver hair and a face carved from years of hard living. But his eyes, when they found mine in the darkness, were kind. "Amelia Romano," he said softly. "You look just like your mother, and you have your father's eyes." He glanced at the gun I was pointing at him. "Smart to keep that out, but you can lower it. I promised Lorenzo I'd protect you if anything ever happened to him. I'm sorry it took me 16 years to keep that promise." "Who are you?" I whispered. "Silas Blackwood. Your father and I served together before he joined the Falcones. When he tried to get out, I tried to help him. I failed." The pain in his voice was real. "I've been tracking the Falcones ever since, trying to gather enough evidence to bring them down. Your mother and I worked together for years. She was braver than anyone I've ever known. The men who were chasing me are being dealt with." His smile was cold. "I don't work alone, and I don't play by the same rules as Thorne. Those men won't be reporting back to anyone tonight." A chill ran through me. "Did you kill them? Does it matter? They came here to kill you and destroy the ledger. Your mother spent 20 years building that evidence. I won't let them erase her work." He held out his hand. "We need to move. More will come, and we need to get you somewhere safe before we figure out how to get your children back." I took his hand and let him help me up. "Do you know where they are?" "Not yet, but we will. The Falcones are predictable in some ways. They'll be using your children as leverage to force you to hand over the ledger, which means they'll keep them safe until they have what they want." We climbed down from the firewatch station and moved through the forest with Silas leading the way. He navigated the darkness like he could see in the dark, and I struggled to keep up. After about 20 minutes, we emerged onto a narrow gravel road where a nondescript sedan was waiting. Silas opened the passenger door for me. "Get in, we're meeting Thorne at a safe house about an hour from here. Once we're there, we'll plan our next move." As we drove through the dark Maine countryside, I clutched the backpack with my mother's ledger against my chest. My phone, my real phone, buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Julian's name on the screen. "Don't answer it," Silas said immediately, but I was already swiping to answer, putting it on speaker. I needed to hear his voice, needed to know what kind of monster I'd been married to. "Mia." Julian's voice was smooth concern, the same voice that had whispered loving words to me for 16 years. "I heard about what happened at your mother's house. Are you okay?" The audacity of his concern, the seamless performance, made me want to scream. Instead, I kept my voice level. "Where are my children, Julian? They're safe. They're with me, but there are some very dangerous people who think you have something that belongs to them. If you cooperate, if you hand over whatever you found at your mother's house, this can all be resolved peacefully. You can see the kids again." "How long have you been lying to me?" The question came out before I could stop it. A pause, then a sigh. "Mia, this is complicated. I never wanted you to get caught up in this. Everything I did to protect our family. Don't you dare pretend this was about protection. You've been working for the Falcones since before we met. Our marriage was an assignment." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, the warmth was gone from his voice. "You've been talking to people you shouldn't be talking to. That's unfortunate. It makes this much more complicated. Let me talk to Sophie and Max right now." "That's not going to happen. Not until you bring me the ledger. You have 24 hours, Mia. I'll text you a location. Come alone, bring the ledger, and you can have your children back. If you involve the FBI or anyone else, if I see any sign of a setup, you'll never see them again. Do you understand? How do I know they're safe? How do I know they're even alive? Because they're my children too, and I'm not a monster. They're watching TV right now, completely unaware that their mother is making this harder than it needs to be. 24 hours, Mia. Don't make the wrong choice." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my whole body shaking with rage and fear and helplessness. Silas glanced at me, his expression grim. "He's lying about the timeline," Silas said. "The Falcones won't wait 24 hours. They know every moment you have that ledger is a moment they're vulnerable. They'll try to take it by force long before the deadline." "Then what do I do?" "We use that against them. Thorne has resources, federal authority. I have different resources and no rules to follow. Together, we might be able to create enough chaos to get your children back and keep you alive long enough to use that ledger." We pulled up to what looked like an abandoned farmhouse, but as we approached, I could see the subtle signs of occupation. Security cameras hidden in the trees, reinforced windows, the kind of place that looked decrepit from the outside, but was probably a fortress inside. Thorne was waiting in what had once been the farmhouse's living room. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of intense focus that made you feel like you were the only person in his universe. He stood when I entered, and I saw the badge clipped to his belt. FBI. Mrs. Croft, he said, then corrected himself. I'm sorry, Ms. Romano. Your mother was one of the bravest people I've ever known. I'm sorry I couldn't prevent what happened to your father, and I'm sorry I couldn't warn you about Julian. The operation had to remain secret. Operation? I dropped the backpack on the table and pulled out the ledger. You knew what Julian was the whole time. Not at first. We identified him about 8 years ago, but by then you were married with children. I wanted to pull you out, but Elena insisted we wait. She said if we moved too soon, they'd just disappear and rebuild somewhere else. She wanted them destroyed completely. So you let me stay married to a criminal for 8 more years. You let me build a life with someone who was spying on me. I had no authority to interfere in your personal life without evidence of direct harm. Julian was careful. He never crossed legal lines around you, never gave us cause to arrest him. And your mother was adamant. She said you'd inherited your father's strength, that when the time came, you'd be ready to fight. I wanted to scream at him, to rage against the casual way he discussed using my life as bait in some long-term investigation. But Sophie and Max were out there somewhere, and my anger wouldn't bring them back. I took a breath and opened the ledger on the table. Then let's use this. Tell me how we get my children back and destroy the Falcones in the process. What followed was the longest night of my life. Thorne and Silas pored over the ledger, with Thorne occasionally making calls to various federal agencies, and Silas working on a laptop that seemed to have access to information no civilian should possess. They spoke in a language of operations and assets and tactical advantages that made my legal training feel useless. Around 3 in the morning, Thorne's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then his expression hardened. He put it on speaker. Agent Thorne, this is Leo Falcone. I believe you have something of mine in your custody. I'd never heard Leo Falcone's voice before, but it was exactly what I'd imagined. Cultured, calm, the voice of a man who'd never doubted his own power. Thorne's response was equally calm. Mr. Falcone, I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. Elena Romano's daughter is with you right now, and she has a ledger that belongs to me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to arrange a meeting where Ms. Romano brings me that ledger. In exchange, she gets her children back unharmed. Everyone walks away and we forget this unfortunate situation ever occurred. And if I refuse, then I'll be very disappointed in you, Agent Thorne. You've been investigating my organization for 15 years with nothing to show for it. This ledger won't change that. The people named in it are protected, and you'll spend the next decade trying to build cases that will never make it to trial. Meanwhile, 2 innocent children will grow up without their mother. Is that really how you want this to end? I grabbed the phone before Thorne could stop me. This is Emilia Romano. You killed my father. A pause. Lorenzo Romano made choices that had consequences. Just as you're making choices right now, Ms. Romano. I'm told you're an intelligent woman, a successful attorney. You understand leverage and risk assessment. You have something I want. I have something you want. Let's make a trade and go our separate ways. How do I know my children are safe? You don't. You have to trust that I'm a man of my word. Despite what you've been told, I'm not a monster. I'm a businessman. Your children are collateral, nothing more. Once I have what I want, they're useless to me. You, however, could become a problem if you insist on being difficult. If you hurt them, you'll what Ms. Romano. You're a family law attorney hiding in a farmhouse with a ledger that most courts would never admit as evidence. I own judges, prosecutors, entire police departments. Your mother spent 20 years documenting my crimes, and yet here I am, still free, still powerful. What makes you think you can do what she couldn't? The arrogance in his voice, the casual dismissal of everything my mother had sacrificed, ignited something in me. Because my mother taught me something you've forgotten, Mr. Falcone. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the most power. It's the one with nothing left to lose. I hung up before he could respond. Thorne and Silas were both staring at me. That was either very brave or very stupid, Silas said, but there was approval in his eyes. He's right about one thing, Thorne said carefully. The ledger alone won't be enough. We need corroborating evidence, witness testimony, something that can't be dismissed as the paranoid documentation of a mob wife. And we need it before he loses patience and makes good on his implied threats. Then we give him what he wants, I said. We set up a meeting. We trade the ledger for my children. That's suicide, Silas said flatly. The moment you hand over that ledger, you become a liability. He'll kill you, and probably the kids too, eliminate everyone who knows what's in it. Not if we make sure everyone knows what's in it first. I looked at Thorne. You said you've been investigating the Falcones for 15 years. That means you have partial evidence in complete cases. Things you couldn't quite prove. The ledger fills in those gaps. We have maybe 12 hours before Julian's fake deadline. Use that time. Start making arrests, freezing accounts, serving warrants. Make enough noise that Leo Falcone is too busy defending himself to worry about killing me. Thorne was already nodding, seeing where I was going. We create so much chaos that he needs the ledger more than he needs revenge. He'll want to know what else is out there, what other evidence exists. And while you're creating official chaos, I turned to Silas, you create unofficial chaos. You said my mother worked with you for years. That means you know the Falcone's operation inside and out. Hit them where it hurts. Make them bleed money, lose shipments, turn their own people against each other. Silas smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me glad he was on my side. I've been waiting 20 years for permission to do exactly that. The next 16 hours were a controlled demolition of the Falcone empire. Thorne made call after call, and I watched as years of investigative work suddenly sprang into action. Warrants were executed simultaneously across 4 states. Bank accounts were frozen. Known associates were brought in for questioning. The ledger, or rather carefully selected pages from it, were shared with various federal agencies and state prosecutors. Meanwhile, Silas disappeared for several hours and returned with a satisfied expression. The Falcones had a major shipment coming through Port of Newark, past tense. A rival organization received an anonymous tip about its location and arrival time. There was a very unfortunate incident involving several $1 million worth of merchandise. You started a gang war, I said. I reminded certain parties that the Falcones aren't as untouchable as they pretend to be. When predators smell blood in the water, they circle. Leo Falcone is going to spend the next few days wondering who he can trust and who's plotting to take his place. My phone rang again. Julian, I answered on speaker. What the hell did you do? His smooth facade was cracking. I could hear stress in his voice, maybe even fear. The FBI just raided 3 of our properties. Bank accounts are frozen. Leo is losing his mind. Our properties. I let ice creep into my voice. So you're admitting it now. No more pretending to be an innocent import-export businessman. Mia, you don't understand what you've started. Leo is talking about cutting losses. That includes the kids. If you don't stop this right now, put Sophie on the phone. What? You heard me? Put my daughter on the phone right now, or I send the next batch of evidence to every news outlet in the country. You have 10 seconds. A long pause. Then Sophie's voice, small and frightened. Mom. The sound of her voice hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my tone steady and calm. Hey baby, are you okay? Is Max with you? Yeah, we're both here. Mom, I'm scared. Dad keeps getting angry phone calls, and there are men with guns, and I don't understand what's happening. I know, sweetheart, I know you're scared. But I need you to be brave for just a little longer. Can you do that for me? Are you coming to get us? Yes, very soon. I promise you, Sophie, I am coming for you. Nothing in this world will stop me. Do you believe me? Yes, her voice was stronger now. Good. Now I need you to take care of your brother. Keep him calm. And remember what I always taught you about being strong. Romano women don't surrender, she whispered. And I felt tears burn my eyes, because I'd said those exact words to her 1,000 times, never knowing they came from my mother, from a legacy of survival I'd only just discovered. That's right, baby, we fight. I love you so much. Julian took the phone back. Satisfied now, call off whatever you've unleashed. We can still make a deal. Here's my deal, Julian. You tell me exactly where my children are being held. You give me that location in the next 60 seconds, or Agent Thorne releases everything to the media, and Leo Falcone finds out you're the reason his empire is crumbling. Because I'm guessing he doesn't know you're married to Lorenzo Romano's daughter, does he? I'm guessing that's a detail you kept to yourself all these years. The silence on the other end told me everything. I'd hit a nerve. If Leo finds out that you brought a Romano into the organization, that you married the daughter of the man who tried to betray him, that you've been living with her for 16 years, while she collected evidence against all of you, what do you think he'll do to you, Julian? You're bluffing. You wouldn't risk the kids? Try me. You have 40 seconds. I could hear him breathing hard, could almost feel him calculating odds and options. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight with controlled rage. Falcone Estate, 30 miles north of Seattle, right on the coast. They're in the main house, 2nd floor, east wing. But Mia, if you come there, you're walking into a fortress. Leo has 20 men on that property. You'll never get them out. That's my problem now. Here's what you're going to do, Julian. In exactly 2 hours, you're going to develop a conscience. You're going to walk into FBI headquarters, and you're going to tell them everything. every name, every operation, every dirty secret. In exchange, they'll put you in witness protection, and you might live long enough to see your children grow up. If you run, if you warn Leo, if you do anything except what I just told you, I'll make sure Leo knows exactly who you are and what you've cost him. And if I cooperate, will I ever see Sophie and Max again? For a moment, just a moment, I heard something real in his voice. Regret maybe, or actual love for the children we'd created. But then I remembered the courthouse, the whispered cruelty, the 16 years of lies. That depends on whether you actually are the man you pretended to be, or just a very good actor. 2 hours, Julian. Don't be late. I hung up and looked at Thorne. Can you have agents at FBI Seattle headquarters in 2 hours? Already done. I had people watching him since the call from Leo. If he tries to run, we'll grab him. And can you really offer him witness protection? If his testimony is valuable enough, yes, but Amelia, you can't seriously be thinking of going to that estate. It's a suicide mission. My children are in that house, and 20 armed men are between you and them, Thorne said. Let me coordinate with local law enforcement, get SWAT teams do this properly. How long will that take? He hesitated. 12 hours, maybe more. We need warrants, tactical planning, coordination across jurisdictions. Leo Falcone doesn't have 12 hours before he realizes his empire is under attack and decides to eliminate all loose ends. My children are loose ends. Silas had been quiet through this exchange, but now he spoke up. She's right. We have a narrow window, maybe 6 hours, when Leo is so busy putting out fires that he's not thinking clearly about contingencies. After that, he starts making the hard choices, and those kids become liabilities. So what are you suggesting? Thorne demanded. The 3 of us storm a fortified estate with 20 professional criminals inside. Not the 3 of us, Silas said. I have people. Good people who've been waiting a long time for a chance to hurt the Falcones. Give me 3 hours and I can have a team assembled. Private military contractors. Thorne looked disgusted. I can't be part of this. I'm a federal agent. I can't sanction a vigilante assault. Then look the other way, I said quietly. You've been looking the other way for 15 years while you built your case. Look away for 3 more hours while I get my children back. Thorne stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled out his phone. I'm going to coordinate the arrests of everyone named in the ledger. It's going to take all my attention. I won't be available for the next 4 hours. What you do in that time is beyond my oversight. It was as close to approval as we were going to get. The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation. Silas made calls in languages I didn't speak to people I'd never meet. Equipment arrived in unmarked vehicles. Men and women appeared at the farmhouse, silent professionals who moved with the kind of efficiency that spoke of military training and combat experience. Silas gave me a crash course in tactical basics. How to hold a weapon properly, how to move through a structure, how to identify threats. I was a lawyer, not a soldier, but desperation made me a quick study. He also gave me a bulletproof vest and a communication earpiece. Your job is simple, he said. Stay behind us. Don't try to be a hero. And when we find your kids, you grab them and you run. Don't look back, don't hesitate. My people will cover your extraction. Understood. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. As darkness fell, we loaded into 3 vehicles and headed north toward Seattle. Silas sat next to me in the back of an SUV reviewing blueprints of the Falcone estate he'd somehow acquired. The east wing where the kids are being held has 4 access points, he explained. Leo will have concentrated his security around himself in the main section. He's arrogant enough to assume no one would dare attack him directly. That gives us an advantage. We go in fast, hit the east wing, extract your children, and we're gone before they can coordinate a response. What about Leo? What about him? Are you going to kill him? Silas looked at me with those hard eyes. Would you want me to? I thought about my father murdered for wanting to leave. I thought about my mother spending 20 years in fear and hiding. I thought about Sophie's frightened voice on the phone. The answer should have been easy, but I surprised myself. No, I want him in prison. I want him to stand trial and have everything he's built destroyed in public. I want him to spend the rest of his life in a cell knowing that he was brought down by Lorenzo Romano's daughter. Death is too quick. Silas smiled. You really are Elena's daughter. She said the same thing to me once. Revenge isn't about violence. It's about justice that lasts. We arrived at a staging area about a mile from the Falcone estate. The team gathered in a tight circle while Silas gave final instructions. I was shaking, adrenaline and fear making my hands tremble. One of Silas's people, a woman with kind eyes and scars on her hands, touched my shoulder gently. Your kids are going to be okay, she said quietly. We're very good at what we do, and we all have people we'd burn the world down for. We understand what this means to you. At midnight exactly, we moved in. The Falcone estate was everything I'd imagined. Sprawling mansion, perfectly manicured grounds, the kind of wealth that came from decades of crime. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, but Silas's team moved through shadows like ghosts, disabling cameras and avoiding detection with practiced ease. We reached the east wing, and Silas hand-signaled the breach. 2 of his people planted small charges on a side door. The explosion was surprisingly quiet, just enough to blow the lock. We flowed inside in a tight formation. The interior was all marble and expensive art, and the kind of luxury that made me sick knowing where the money came from. We moved through hallways, clearing rooms. Twice we encountered Falcone's guards, and twice they went down before they could raise an alarm. Silas's team used tranquilizer darts and choker holds, silent and efficient. Then we reached the 2nd floor, and I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Max's voice crying, "I want my mom." I wanted to run toward the sound, but Silas held me back, making me wait, while his team secured the hallway. 2 guards stood outside a locked door. They never saw us coming. Silas personally took them down with a brutal efficiency that should have frightened me but didn't. These men had stood guard while my children cried for me. Silas picked the lock and pushed the door open. Sophie and Max were inside, sitting on a bed in what looked like a luxurious prison. The moment they saw me, they screamed, "Mom," and ran toward me. I caught them both, dropping to my knees and pulling them into my arms. They were crying, and I was crying, and for one perfect moment, nothing else existed except the feeling of holding my children again. "We have to move," Silas said urgently. "Now." I stood, keeping Sophie and Max close. "Stay right next to me, babies. Don't let go of my hands." We moved back through the hallway, but this time, alarms were screaming. Our presence had been discovered. Gunfire erupted from somewhere below us. Silas's team returned fire, creating a protective corridor as we rushed toward the exit. Then Leo Falcone himself appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by 4 men with automatic weapons. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 70, but with eyes that radiated cold intelligence and absolute ruthlessness. "Ms. Romano," he said calmly, as if we were meeting at a dinner party rather than in the middle of a gunfight. "I should have killed you the day you were born just to be thorough. Lorenzo's daughter, Elena's little secret. I knew she was hiding something, but I never imagined she'd raise a viper in my own garden. You killed my father," I said, positioning myself between him and my children. "Your father was weak. He chose love over loyalty. Fatal mistake." He gestured at the armed men around him. "You have nowhere to go. My men are sealing every exit. Surrender the children, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to beg." "The FBI is already dismantling your organization," I said. "Julian is turning state's witness right now. Your bank accounts are frozen. Your associates are being arrested. It's over, Leo. You've already lost." Something flickered in those cold eyes. Uncertainty, fear, then rage. "If I've lost, then I have nothing left to protect. No reason to show mercy." He raised his hand to give the order to fire. That's when Silas stepped in front of me and my children. "You'll have to go through me first, old man. And I've been waiting 20 years for this." The standoff lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then everything happened at once. One of Silas's snipers, positioned somewhere outside, shot out the lights. The hallway plunged into darkness. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes creating strobing light. I threw myself over Sophie and Max, covering them with my body. Silas was moving through the chaos like a demon, taking down Falcone's guards with brutal precision. I heard Leo shouting orders, heard his men trying to regroup. Then new sounds. Battering rams shouted commands, federal agents identifying themselves. Thorne had come after all, couldn't stay away, had brought his people in through the front entrance, while we created chaos in the east wing. "FBI, drop your weapons." The shooting stopped. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in red. Leo Falcone was on his knees, Silas's gun pressed to his temple. Around us, FBI agents were securing the scene, handcuffing Falcone's men. Thorne appeared, taking in the situation. He looked at Silas, at Leo, at me and my children. "Everyone lower your weapons. This ends here tonight legally." Silas stared at Leo for a long moment. I saw murder in his eyes, saw 20 years of rage and grief, demanding satisfaction. Then slowly he lowered his gun and stepped back. "He's all yours, Agent Thorne, but if he walks on some technicality, if he buys his way out of this, I'll finish what I started." FBI agents swarmed Leo Falcone, reading him his rights, securing him in handcuffs. He looked at me as they led him away, and I saw something I never expected to see in those cold eyes. respect. "You're more like your father than you know," he said. He had that same fire, that same refusal to surrender. "Maybe in another life, another world." He shrugged. "But this world has its rules. I broke them. Now I pay. Tell Elena I said she played a long game better than anyone I've ever known." They took him away, and I stood there in the ruins of his empire, holding my children, barely able to process that it was really over. Thorne approached carefully. "We got Julian at FBI headquarters 40 minutes ago. He's singing like a canary, giving us everything. Combined with the ledger and what we've gathered tonight, the Falcones are finished. Every lieutenant, every associate, every corrupted official. It'll take years to prosecute them all, but they're done." "And me?" I asked. "Am I facing charges for this?" I gestured at the carnage around us. "I got here just in time to rescue hostages from a dangerous criminal organization," Thorne said carefully. "Everything that happened before I arrived is beyond my knowledge. Of course, I'll need your statement about how you discovered evidence of your children's kidnapping, but I imagine it was all very traumatic, and your memory might be unclear about certain details." "Very unclear," I agreed. Silas had disappeared along with his team. I had a feeling I'd never see him again, that he'd fade back into whatever shadows he'd emerged from. But as we were loading into FBI vehicles to be taken to safety, I found a note tucked into Sophie's pocket. In rough handwriting, "Your father would be proud. Live well. Thorne has my number if you ever need me. S." The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Julian's testimony combined with the ledger and the evidence seized from the estate became the foundation for the largest organized crime prosecution in decades. Leo Falcone, 53 of his associates, and 27 corrupted officials were indicted on hundreds of charges. The trial was televised, and I sat in the courtroom every single day watching Leo Falcone's empire crumble in public. He never looked at me, never acknowledged my presence, but I knew he felt it. Lorenzo Romano's daughter, the loose end he should have tied up years ago, had become his destruction. He was sentenced to life without parole. So were most of his top lieutenants. Julian, in exchange for his cooperation, received 20 years with possibility of parole. Before he was sent away, he asked to see the kids one last time. I let Sophie and Max decide. Sophie refused. "He's not my dad anymore," she said with a conviction that broke my heart and made me proud at the same time. Max, younger and still confused, agreed to a supervised visit. He came back quiet and sad and told me Julian had cried and said he was sorry. "Do you forgive him?" I asked carefully. Max thought about it for a long time. "I don't know, he did bad things, but he's still my dad. Is that okay?" "That's very okay, baby. You don't have to forgive him or hate him. You can just feel however you feel." The custody arrangement was voided, obviously. With Julian in prison and the circumstances of the original ruling exposed as a result of criminal conspiracy, I regained full custody without even needing a hearing. But Seattle felt tainted now, contaminated by too many lies and too much pain. We needed a fresh start. I used some of the reward money from the FBI and the restitution funds from the Falcones' seized assets to buy a small house on the California coast. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed wealth, just a bright open place where my children could heal and grow. I also established the Elena Romano Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of organized crime, providing legal services, counseling, and protection for people trying to escape criminal organizations. My mother had spent 20 years fighting in secret. I would fight in the open using everything she'd taught me. Sophie started therapy and slowly came back to herself. She was more serious now, had grown up too fast, but she was strong. She started writing poetry about surviving trauma, and it was beautiful and heartbreaking and fierce. Max had nightmares for the first few months, but they gradually faded. He started playing soccer and making friends and being a normal kid again. He asked about Julian sometimes, and I answered his questions honestly, never trying to poison him against his father, but never lying about what Julian had done. As for me, I learned to sleep again, learned to trust again, though that took longer. I saw a therapist twice a week for the first year, working through decades of deception and manipulation I hadn't even recognized. I learned to recognize the difference between love and control, between sacrifice and martyrdom. 1 year to the day after everything ended, I was standing on my back porch watching Sophie and Max play on the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible. My phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello, Ms. Romano, it's Thorne. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." "We're good. Really good, actually. How's the prosecution going?" 53 convictions, so far more coming. You did it, Amelia." You took down one of the most powerful crime families in the country. The FBI wants to give you a commendation. I don't need recognition, I just needed my kids back. Your mother would be proud. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I hope so. I think about her every day, about what she sacrificed to give me a chance at a normal life, and how she prepared me for war without me even knowing it. She was preparing you your whole life, teaching you to be strong, to fight, to never surrender. That's the real legacy. After we hung up, I stood there watching my children, thinking about legacies and choices and the price of freedom. My father had tried to escape the Falcones and died for it. My mother had spent 20 years building a weapon to destroy them, and I had finished what they started. Sophie looked up from the beach and waved. Max was building a sandcastle, completely absorbed in the simple joy of creation. They were free. We were all free. But freedom isn't the absence of pain or the erasure of trauma. It's the choice to keep living, keep growing, keep building something better despite everything you've lost. It's the decision to turn survival into thriving, to transform wounds into wisdom. So here's what I learned, what I want anyone reading this to understand. You are not defined by what was done to you. You are not chained to relationships that diminish you or family members who betray you. You are not required to sacrifice yourself on the altar of other people's expectations. Sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes strength means admitting you were wrong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself. My mother taught me that Romano women don't surrender, but she also taught me something even more important. We survive, we adapt, and when we're backed into a corner, we come out fighting. Not with blind rage, but with calculated precision. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not to destroy, but to protect what matters most. I didn't just survive my nightmare. I dismantled it piece by piece and built something beautiful from the ruins. You can too. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was hiding who they really were? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice to protect the people you love? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe because I'll be sharing more stories of survival strength and the courage it takes to rebuild your life after betrayal. Your support means everything. Remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of a life built on truth instead of lies. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.